Okay, in today's lesson, we're going to be starting on page Windows 12 out of the textbook if you'd like to follow along using that. But we're going to be taking a look and focusing on just a few topics today. One of them being dialog boxes, the next one being scroll bars. We're going to be taking a look at help and support, and also ending a Windows session on there. The first thing that we're going to be covering over is the dialog boxes on there. And a dialog box is a special type of window in which you specify how you want to complete an operation on there. So using this for an example, on our Word window, we're just going to go to the print dialog box. So we're going to click on the office button here, and we're just going to click on print. And this is the print dialog box. There's something similar to it on page Windows 13 in your textbook on there. But there'll be a few similarities and a few differences based upon the style or the version of Windows that you're using. The first thing we're going to notice on here is that there is a close button. So if you didn't want to complete this print option, you can just click on the close button. There's also a help button on here as well. That's not in the textbook, but there's a help button if you need help with this feature. In this version, we actually have a drop-down box, and you notice that has the different printers that are available. And the one printer that we're going to be taking a look at here is the Lexmark T644. You may have just the Lexmark printer, or you may have the 218 T644. Those are the printer. Those are all the same printer, and those are going to be the ones that we use in this class on there. But you can select your printer from there. And then we have a few other things that are similar to the diagram figure A-12. We do have some option buttons where you can either, whichever one is selected is going to be the one that is going to happen. We can either print all the pages, the current pages, or we can just have a specific set number of pages. And here's some instructions that explains about that. We also have some other drop-down menus that we have on what to print, and there's a list of things that are there. Usually we're just going to use the defaults on most of these on there. It tells you what pages that you can print. Over here what we have is what we call a spin box, and you can choose the number of prints that you would like to have, or number of copies that you can have on there as well. Close that back down again. And the great thing about Spinbox is if you need multiple copies, you don't have to click this one at a time like this. You can actually just select the number that's on there and type it in, such as 12 copies on there, just using your keyboard. Okay, moving on just a little bit, there is another options button here. This is kind of a yes-no type button that's on there. They call this a checkbox, and this asks us if we want to collate our work, which means, do we want to have them in order? If we're having multiple copies, we'll have page 1, page 2, then page 3, and then it'll start again, page 1, page 2, page 3, if it's a 3-page document. Otherwise, if you click on that button, you see that it's going to print all the page 1s first, then all the pages 2s next, and then page 3s after that. And then, of course, there's some zoom features here. You'll probably also know some of them will have an options. And if you go to the options, then this will bring up the Word options for you in this program, but some of them will have some different things as well. So you'll just kind of have to look at that. Some other, if you take a look at a couple other, dialog boxes that's on there, you'll notice that some of these actually has tabs on the top, which means that there's different sets of menus that you can be looking at. So, there's the indents and spacing, and then there's the line and page break. So that may be on there as well. There is some text boxes on some of these that you can click on and everything and just type into it. So you can look through the options that's on page Windows 13 and really kind of see what each of the different features will use on there. But those are some of the most common ones that we're going to be taking a look at. Okay, now moving on just a little bit, we're going to move on to page 14, where we're going to be talking about scroll bars. And whenever we talk about scrolling, we're talking about moving up and down a document, an image, or something along those lines. I'm going to be using Microsoft Word here, where that's going to be the program that we're going to be getting into here very shortly. You'll notice that looking down here, I have 21 pages, and I'm on page 1 on there. One way of moving up and down through this document is using the scroll bars, and there's actually a couple different sets of scroll bars. And you may be saying, well, Mr. Irwin, there's only one of them right here, and this one right here was what we call the vertical scroll bar on there. So it has buttons that are up on the top and on the bottom, and all you have to really do is just click on those up and down arrows, and you notice that we're scrolling through a document. But also notice as we're scrolling through this document that there's this little box right here. Now, depending on how many pages it is, that box is either larger or smaller. But that is what we call the vertical scroll box, and this is where, as you see, I can scroll up and down through the pages, and it moves me throughout my document. Now, if I would zoom in on this just a little bit to where it's a little bit bigger than what we have on there, you'll now notice that we have another scroll bar that's on the bottom, and this is what we call our horizontal scroll bar. We do have our left scroll arrow here and our right scroll arrow here, and then notice that we have a much larger here horizontal scroll box, and I can click on that, and you notice I can scroll from side to side on there. So those are some of the different scroll methods that you can actually use. Sometimes you can actually incorporate these with that little wheel that's in the middle of your mouse. That's on there. That's a scroll wheel is what they use, and I'm using that middle wheel right now, and notice that my mouse pointer is in the middle, but using that wheel I can actually scroll through my document. So that is why that wheel is there. If you look on table A6 using scroll bars on page Windows 15, you see that there's some helpful hints on using scroll bars. If I'm wanting to move down a small increment or one line, I can click the scroll arrow at the bottom of the vertical scroll bar, and I'll go down one line. And there you go. See, it moves very slowly. If I'm wanting to move up a small increment or one line, I click on the up arrow, and notice it moves up that way. And you can continue reading through that where you can move down a Windows height. It says click between the scroll box and the scroll down arrow. So if I want to move down one page on there, or move down one window, it's not necessarily a page, it's a window on there. If I was at a single page on here, which I'll show you that right here, if I go to a whole page, if I click in between the scroll bar right here and this bottom scroll arrow, notice that it takes me to the next page, and it goes one page at a time every time you click that on there. And you can do that same thing going up as well, one page at a time going up. Just click between the scroll bar and the scroll arrows that's on there. If you're wanting to move up a large distance, you can actually just click and drag the scroll box, as I showed you on there. We can go up and down to the top and bottom very quickly on there as well. And same thing with the left and right, it is very similar with that. Okay, let's take a quick look, and this is one thing that I always recommend taking a look at and using, and that is actually the help. On Windows 7, when you click on the Start button, there is a Help and Support button that's on there. And this is a very valuable tool. It looks a little bit different than what's in the textbook. If you try it on your computer, it's going to look different as well, where you have Windows XP. But on here you can search up any help topic. So if you were trying to go through and follow through the textbook on the steps on page 16, if we go into the Help and Support, it wants us to find an answer for Windows Basics. So here I can actually just type this in. Let me close this down on there. And if I go into and just type in Windows Basics, and just hit enter, then notice it has that here's the 30 best results for Windows Basics, and I can actually go ahead and just click on all topics, and then here you can actually learn a little bit about Windows as well. So I would strongly recommend taking a look at some of these topics. Similar topics are on Windows XP as well, so you'll have to go through the help and support link on there, and that way so you can be able to look at these. So if you're wanting to know the parts of a computer, you can take a look, and there's the parts of the computer. This looks very familiar from an assignment that we have done earlier in the class, and it talks a little bit about those different parts and everything else. Very useful, very informative on that, so you can actually take a look and get an idea of how to use it. In this version we have back arrows, and if you need to know how to use your keyboard, this is very basic, and it talks it tells you everything that you possibly need to know about using Windows on there. Most programs such as Windows does not have an owner's manual anymore, or an operations manual. They include it in on the program, and that help and support is where that comes from. The last little bit that we're going to take a look at is ending a Windows session. And like I said, this is going to be just slightly different once again from your XP machines on there. But if we take a look here at our Start button, here we have, we've shown this in the previous video on there, we have our Shutdown button and we have our options that's on here. And a few of the little things that we'll take a look at is just a pure definition of what those are. Because when you're done with your Windows session, on there, a lot of times you need to go ahead and save and close any of your open files. That's the only way to really ensure that you have on there you have the your file saved and ready to go for the next time. But once you save and close any of your open files and any open programs and any open windows, then that is when you should be able to go ahead and shut down your computer. Now there's some different options. On Windows 7 here we have these switch users, and that will, when you switch users, it actually locks your account and displays the welcome screen so another user can log on there. If we go to the next one, the log off, that closes all your Windows programs and documents and then displays the welcome screen on there. Really, it's strongly recommended, even though that it will close your windows and programs and documents. I would go ahead and do that just to make sure that they do save. Next on there we have the lock, and the lock locks your user's account and displays the welcome screen. That way, so when you have to, when you're going to come back in and use your computer again, that is when you can go ahead and get logged back in. Underneath that is the restart, and the restart will actually shut down your computer and then turn it back on. Restarts it, so that is the restart button. And down here, these are the ones that are most commonly kind of mixed up and confused on there. First of all is the sleep. When you put your computer to sleep, it will save your work. It turns off the monitor, not the power to the monitor, but it will turn off the display to the monitor, and then it will reduce the power consumption to all of your hardware components on your computer so it appears to be off. So it looks like your computer's asleep. When you hibernate, it's a little bit more than sleep, because if we look at our bear friends and everything, hibernating is for a long period of time, while sleeping is for a short period of time. When you hibernate your computer, it's going to save all your work, and then it turns off your computer. So it's similar to just shutting down on there, which shutting down completely shuts down your computer. Hibernate does a few other things before it actually shuts it down on there. So that is ending a Windows Vista session. Once again, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask Mr. Irwin. Test out these buttons and everything. I always mention to all my students that you, most cases, can't break the computer just by normally doing some of these functions and features that we practice here in class. So practice these steps, follow the directions out of the textbook, and if you have any questions, just ask Mr. Irwin. And we will see you during the next lesson.